Richard.
All right.
What did you want to talk about?
Hi there. Yeah, I'd like to talk about a couple little things here. I've been listening to the show, and I'm just kind of curious. Okay, why? So the atheist position isn't to actually. Basically, the atheist position is not making a claim that there isn't a God. Correct?
I don't think it can.
There are certainly people who use it in that way, and that is one way to use it. It's just that's not what we mean when we say the word.
Yeah.
Oh, go
ahead.
Why can't the atheist position be that though? Why can't it be that it's making the claim that there isn't a God?
Sure, because we're not the arbiters of. Oh, go ahead. Say again.
Well, okay. Have you seen that Carl Sagan video? He makes a good example, like with an apple, dropping an apple down on a table with these little cut out pieces of circles and squares and triangles, like a flatlander world, just flat. And we as human beings, we're living in this third dimension. So we're supposedly supposed to understand that there's more dimensions, and there's how many dimensions? Who knows how many?
Yes, the ant and the piece of paper and all of that.
Yeah, so Carl Sagan, he's got this apple in his hand. He starts dropping it lower to the table so that the flatlanders there can see what it would be like to see an actual apple or whatever.
I remember this.
Yeah.
Come down into the world. Mm-hmm. And to them, they're like, what the hell is it? They don't know what it is. And they don't know what it is. They can't describe it. There's no evidence to show what it is. It doesn't look like an apple to them. So if we're living in three dimensions, and there's more dimensions out there, evidence is irrelevant, I think, to actually have to, I don't think that,
evidence
is relevant, really.
Well, here's the thing. What makes evidence relevant? What is our goal? We've talked about epistemology. We've talked about ontology. It sounds like we're moving into axiology. What is the goal here?
Truth, right? It's true. It's fact, like a fact.
And so,
if I could show you something like in my hand, like if I could show something to somebody,
mm-hmm.
I can say, here, I have this right here in my hand. Here, look, here it is. And it's like, okay, there's the evidence, right?
Yeah, the time to believe that would be when the evidence is there. So you asked a question earlier, and I do want to answer it.
Yeah.
You said how come it can't be that hard atheist kind of, that no gods exist. And again, you're talking to two people who are just people.
No, what I was at.
We are not the ACA, although I think the ACA would back us on this, and we're not the Pope of atheism or anything like that.
No, he's a patron.
Right. Yeah. That said, well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Because I've talked to so many people with such disparate definitions of God that I think to make a hard no claim, like I'll give you an example, Richard. Somebody has called in and said, hey, I believe that God is the universe. Those words are synonymous. That God does not have any magical properties, that God does not think as a separate being,
mm-hmm.
That God is just the universe. So for me to say, hey, that God claim is like every other God claim and does not exist, just, that's painting with a brush that I think it just can't. I think that you have to listen to the claim and evaluate the claim and then come to that conclusion, which is why we push for the definition that we do, because it pushes people to listen and then engage from there.
It's like a choice of words,
and it's important. So,
Catholic.
If you believed that God was an elf that lived in your... What I was going to say is, if you believe that God is an elf that lived in your butt, but you could not show it, and scans couldn't show it, and you investigated thoroughly and it's not there, then you can make the hard claim, okay, that definition of God does not exist, and then you can make that hard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, it seems like atheists are being very careful what their what their position is. Okay, very careful. And to me, if I think about how if I go back, just if we go right back to that, the atheists strictly they're not making a claim that there isn't a God. They're just not accepting or they're rejecting the claim that there is a God. And so what I'm thinking is, well, why don't they make the claim that there isn't a God?
Well, we do, depending on the claim.
Right.
There isn't.
Well, no,
there's no evidence for that.
Richard, I just gave you an example. Well,
there's also the opposite of evidence. You know what I mean? There's
no,
in other words, okay.
No, you can have evidence and you can have bad evidence. It's still a type of evidence, but I think we're kind of moving in different directions here. Do you get that we just gave you an example? You can't say, no, there's no way to prove it's not. No, it depends on your claim. If you claimed that this glass of water that I'm holding is God,
right?
They're just synonyms, then I would say, okay, I accept that because I'm investigating this glass of water. I have a high degree of confidence that this glass of water exists. That is why, because God is
calling that God.
Right.
That's because I'm calling that God, and you say, okay, well then that's God. But
exactly
right.
That doesn't matter. Yeah, it's a glass of water, is what it is.
Well,
but,
and that's
okay. Here, let me say this. Okay, so that there's a difference between taking a position where you are making a claim, and you're also required to show evidence for that claim. And then being in the other position where the atheist is saying, well, I reject that claim, but they're also not making the claim that there is no God,
It depends.
Okay, so
again, it depends, right? We just gave you an example of a time that I would agree, and I gave you an example of a time I would disagree.
Yeah, let's try it like this. I consider myself an agnostic atheist. And I know there are going to be people who are like, oh, but V, those words cannot go together. And I think they do. But if you disagree, you can call in. So for me, I am agnostic about the idea of any potential God existing. There could be some deistic universe type thing that we don't have evidence for, we can never prove or disprove. It might or might not exist. And that's fine. And I'll admit, we don't have the evidence to prove or disprove that. So I'm agnostic about it. It doesn't impact me, doesn't impact my life. It can exist. I don't really fucking care. But if you say, well, the Christian God exists, and I don't know what kind of theist you are, Richard, so we can get into this if you would like. If you tell me the Christian God exists of the classical, version, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, or maximally great, however you want to define that, I can be a strong atheist about that particular claim and say, I will make the claim that particular God does not exist. But then, of course, I have to back that up with my own evidence, and my evidence would be the laws of logic, right? Or historical evidence that contradicts the claims in the Bible. And then we could have that discussion. Right. But yeah, it really is individual to the person. So we can talk about how we personally use these definitions, but it's going to change regardless, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, I agree. I see what you're saying there. Yeah, it depends. There's some things to it. I know that Exodus 21 is brought up many times and everything. But see, back a long time ago, back in those days, there were no banks around. There was no banks. The only way that somebody could pay somebody back was if they were, to do services for people.
Oh, why did we move to slavery in the Bible? I'm sorry, Richard. This is like a hard left turn into slavery. If we want to. I'm sorry.
I don't want to get into that.
Then why did you get into it?
Wait,
we can't.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, indentured servitude. He was starting to move into indentured servitude.
Some of those Matt Dillahunty videos I've seen, when he's on there and he's talking about this, he's so when he goes off on there, he's just like, oh, would you be my slave for all this? But I think that is there's banks nowadays, so it's really hard for us to understand what back then. It's just It was a different thing. It was a totally different thing.
Richard,
The two options, you guys, in case you're listening, are banks or slavery. I'm sorry.
okay.
That was just
No,
funny to me.
that's okay. So Richard,
But listen, let me
hold on, Richard.
Yeah.
You've honestly given me a really, really good place to talk about something that has been coming up in the comments for videos the last few weeks, and people say, why do they get so upset when they talk about other shows? Here's the thing.
Right.
We're not those other hosts. I feel uncomfortable making a statement on behalf of someone else. And on top of that, we are hosts in and of ourselves. We would love to talk about what we are talking about, right? So if we make a claim and somebody wants to
Absolutely.
call us to the table on it, absolutely. It just definitely feels like, I know we're the younger sister show of the Atheist Experience, but that doesn't mean that we should only be arbitrating what other shows are doing.
Right.
you know?
We'd feel really weird talking about how anybody else saw these issues. We
Yeah.
only speak for us.
And that said, it definitely feels
what you got.
like old episodes of the Atheist Experience. I remember lots of other hosts would, they get a call to AXP and it'd be like, hey, Matt said this thing. And then the other hosts who, Matt's not on that week, and they'd be like, okay, call when Matt's there. I want you to have the conversation.
I mean, you guys have a different approach on the same subjects.
Now, when it comes to slavery, I agree with Matt.
Mhm.
I think Matt's got a good beat on it. But give him a call on that
It
one.
says this and that and the other.
Yeah. So
the other one thing I wanted to talk about real quick is I could describe something like, let's say you make something, right? If you made something, me or anybody else could describe it, all right? It could be described what it is. Same thing with God. If God made something, anybody could describe that too.
well, you're making an assumption.
It's like
You're making an assumption there.
what's so overwhelming about that? If God made the universe, if God made the whole universe.
Yeah, that if is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, Richard. That if is doing all the heavy lifting. If God existed, then God existed, right? If God exists, then any statement about God would point towards that God, because you're predicating it on that
Right.
God existing. For the if is doing so much fucking heavy lifting that I think that we have to question whether or not if is a good way to start that. So,
I see what you're saying now.
but think about it.
What I'm saying,
I was going to say, think about it. I know we've got a couple of other calls we want to take, but hopefully this was a beneficial conversation for you.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in, Richard.
Definitely, you guys are awesome. I will definitely call back. I hope I get lucky enough to get through again. And I didn't wait that long either. About a few minutes.
Perfect.
That's good. It was good talking to you.
Good talking
You
to you
as
too.
well.
Take care. What I appreciate is that he called in right at the beginning of the show,
Mhm.
which means that our call screeners could talk to him, pop it in the queue,
And have it ready to go.
Yeah, because we could make sure that we had enough time to talk to him. If somebody calls in late, even if they're a theist caller, that does not mean that they're necessarily going to make it to the front. So call in early. That way we can make sure we get
Right.
your
You'll see
call.
we've spent the first hour on 3-4 calls. That's
Yeah.
a long time to talk with us if you prefer to have a longer conversation.
And we have a lot of callers who I would love to spend hours talking to.
Right.
So